Every one of us carries a story we don't always talk about. The quiet battles, the heavy days, the moments that cracked us open, and the moments that stitched us back together. We've all stumbled. We've all broken. We've all stood at the edge of something we weren't sure we could come back from. And somehow, through strength we didn't know we had, we rose anyway. Because inside every person, there is a spark that refuses to die, a hope that refuses to stay silent, a heart that refuses to give up no matter how dark the night gets. And that's why we're here, to listen, to learn, to witness the courage it takes just to be human. Every soul you hear on the show has walked through something that shaped them, sharpened them, and carried them forward. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a battle. Everyone has a journey. And this is where you come to hear it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome into Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Today's guest is someone who has literally built his life around discipline, courage, and curiosity. Chris Friedman is a Shaolin Kung Fu master, a professional martial arts instructor, and the author of the gripping psychological thriller, Mummy, I Don't Want To, a story born in the mountains near the legendary Shaolin Temple in China. Over more than a decade living and training in China and appearing in films, commercials, and media along the way, Chris has explored not only the limits of the body, but also the darkest corners of the human mind, drawing on his background in psychology to create stories that feel terrifyingly real. In this conversation, we're going to talk about his journey from a kid who obsessed with martial arts to a shifu, a writer and screen storyteller, and what he learned about fear, discipline, and redemption on that path. And for those that don't know, a shifu is a Chinese title for a teacher or skilled tradesperson, but it carries a deeper meaning than just instructor. It's made up of characters meaning teacher and father, and is used to address masters, especially in martial arts. The term implies a mentor-apprentice relationship where the shifu guides the student through life lessons and human principles, not just fighting techniques. So, Chris, welcome in. How are we doing today?
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you for the nice introduction. That was very nice.
We're
I'm
excited
doing
to have
fine.
you.
Thank you.
So tell my listeners a little bit about yourself, where you were born and raised, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So I'm from Long Island, New York. I'll be 55 in 2 months. So I was born in 71, and my family kind of comes from an entertainment background. When they were younger, my father and mother were dancers. It was kind of like that 1940 style, I guess, 50 style, where they kind of sing and dance and do comical stuff. So like they're not famous or anything, but they like did do that for a living when they were like very young, and they met in a show. So like I kind of always had that like in my blood. And when I was 9 years old, I saw like a Bruce Lee movie on an old black and white TV, and like I just became like a fanatic for Asian culture and martial arts. And 2 years later, I got to start studying. There was like two schools in the neighborhood. I got to do like a karate, and I also just got like really, really into Asian culture. So I would go to like New York City whenever I could, to Chinatown, and I got
Yeah, it
into.
must have been awesome. It's still unbelievable today, the Chinatown down in New York City. It's still absolutely crazy. So you talk about Bruce Lee, right? You're a young kid. You see this Bruce Lee movie. Do you remember what movie it was?
I can't be for sure, but I'm probably gonna say Enter the Dragon.
Yeah. And there was so, like, I don't know if people have watched Bruce Lee, but if you watch him, how quick he is and fast he is, and he's just an absolute, genius when it comes to his body, his spirit, everything was connected with him. He was so talented. And so you get into at a young age, you get into the martial arts, at a very young age. And you said you come from a family that was in shows and all that, which must have been pretty cool, probably hearing stories from your mom and dad about them, being in shows and doing all that in the entertainment world. But then so what was it like growing up in New York City over in Long Island?
Yeah, it was boring, to be honest. It was really, really boring. And also, all that excitement's going on, 45 minutes away, but it feels like it's in another state. Like you can't
Yeah.
really go
Like
there.
another world almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really like Long Island. I feel like it's the city has an excitement, the country has its peace and beauty, and the suburbs are just like the worst of both worlds.
Yeah. So you get through high school, right? So when do you make the move to China? At what age do you move to China?
So I had been dreaming about this since I was a kid. So when I was doing my karate as a kid, a teenager, I would watch these like on Channel 5 every Saturday at 3 o'clock. They would have like a Chinese Kung Fu movie. And I would watch that. Afterwards, I'd put on a uniform. I'd go in my backyard. I'd pretend I was in China. So I always wanted to do this, but I didn't get an opportunity to actually go to China till I was about 36. And after I went to China for 2 weeks, I met somebody there and they gave me the idea that like I could move to China, I could teach English as a foreign language. So then I saved up money and I left. By the time I got there, I was like 37 years old already.
Okay, okay. So you get there, right? You get there at 37. You were always thinking about China, getting over there and seeing it. So what brings you first to China for the 2 weeks? Were you just visiting?
So what happened was I was studying with one teacher. He's a famous teacher named Ren Wang Yi. Actually, he had a student, Lou Reed, who was a famous singer, Lou Reed. And so I went to a tournament and I hurt my knee. And then about 3 months later, when I could walk again, I wanted to find a teacher close to me. I was actually living in New York City at the time. So I found the teacher was closer to me. At the end of the year, he's like, hey, we've started to take these trips every year to China. Do you want to go? So I was like, I would love to, but I was living in a little apartment in Jersey City. It was like still like a hood. It was really like a dangerous neighborhood. And it was like poor. And it was like, I wasn't making any money. And I was like, I'd love to, but I don't have the money. He's like, well, you have the whole year to save. Think about it. So I went back for about 2 weeks and like I thought about it and I'm like, yes, I got to do this. So at the end of the year, like he took a trip there to do training and I went, it was in Beijing and I went for 2 weeks. And that's what started the whole ball rolling. Like
Okay, so your first trip over there, what was it like? What did you experience? Were you like, hey, I got to get back here. I got to go see it. I got to get back here. I have to.
it was amazing. Like we had a really nice group of people and the training was amazing and it was a really cool experience to be standing on the ground. Like I didn't do a whole lot of traveling before this. So like to be standing on my feet on the ground in China, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And it was a great experience. I got to do very, cool training, but also just like cool experiences. And then when I was going home, I was on the subway back to New York. I was actually crying. Like I was like, I have to go back. This is where I should be. So it was
Reality
that.
set in.
Yeah.
The reality of shit. I got to go back to the real world. So your first trip there, you go, do you get to see any of the, the Shaolin Temple? Did you get to see any of that on your first trip?
No, because we were in Beijing. I was doing a different martial arts style at the time. So I did get to go to the Great Wall of China. I have a cool picture from that. So I got to go to Great Wall of China. I got to, just experience Beijing and some like the famous places in Beijing. I forget the Tiananmen Square and stuff like that. I think we
Yes, you
went
get
there.
you
A couple
to
other
see
places.
a little bit while you're training. So you come back, and reality hits you back you're back in the States. And so when do you decide, hey, I'm going back to China? When does that happen?
So I met a girl there. Like she became my friend and she spoke English. And I told her like I want to live here. What can I do? And she's like, you could teach English. So I thought about it. As soon as I went back, I signed up for a teach English as a foreign language course on the internet. And then I saved some money. I sent her a little money to find us a place. And then I can't remember exactly. It was probably like 7 months later I moved and it was going to be like a year and it wound up being like 13 years.
Okay. So you come back, you're here 7 months, and then you're back. You go back to China. So when you make those plans, right? You're making those plans to move to China, teach English. What part of China do you go to?
So that was Beijing. And I spent
Okay.
3 years in Beijing, Chaoyong district. It was Chaoyong district. And I didn't like Beijing. The training was great. The martial art training was great. They had great teachers there, but it's really spread out. Everything's far apart. The weather's horrible. It's very dry. Like the winter's super cold and dry. This numb, dull, dry. And the people there, they have this little attitude, like they're a little bit kind of like proud because it's like the capital. And they're also like got this, I would describe it like in American slang as like narc. Especially like they act like a
Yeah.
narc. They're like
Yeah.
everybody there feels like a narc in Beijing. It's like you feel that vibe and it's not cool. It's just not cool. I didn't like it there.
Okay. So how long do you spend in Beijing? How long do you spend there before you move?
I was about there for about 3 years.
Okay, so after the 3 years, you're teaching English, and how are the people receptive to you that you're teaching English to? Are they appreciative? Do they like it, or what's that like?
They're very appreciative. You're almost like just being a foreigner, you feel like you're a celebrity there. Like so like you get treated kind of special. The pay is good. It's good pay for teaching English. And the people who are doing this are kind of like you could say like kind of like upper class,
Yeah,
and that's like it's a really easy way to make money. I mean, you could get by pretty easy doing that down there.
and how tough was it, for the people you're teaching English? Did you know any Chinese at all?
Now I do, but at the time I knew next to nothing. But they don't want you to even use it. Like if you can speak Chinese, they don't want you to use it. They want
Oh,
you
okay,
to immerse themselves into it.
strictly English, nothing, No Chinese, nothing.
And even the kids, like the upper class kids who can pay, the parents can pay a lot of money because it's not cheap for the foreign teachers to teach them like one on one for tutors. They have been doing English. They've been studying English since they were like 5. So some of these kids, these like upper class kids who've like traveled around the world, they're like 9 years old. They can have a conversation in English, you know?
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So you spent 3 years there, and then you guys move. Where do you move? Where do you move to next?
So I moved to Shenzhen. Shenzhen is southern part of China and it's close to Hong Kong. Like you could take a train ride to Hong Kong. Now Shenzhen is total different world. It's beautiful there. Very modern, super beautiful. Like there's palm trees, there's big sidewalks and there's palm trees on the side and there's really modern buildings and you can get Western food there. I wasn't really looking for all this because I was already getting kind of old, but there's beautiful women everywhere and they're really young. Like they're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
30 and under. Like now that wasn't my thing because I was already like close to 40 to 40 or something. But like it's just a nice place to be.
So you get there, right? So did you get to go to any, like, I know, I think Bruce Lee was down from right near, I think he was from Kowloon Tong, I believe. I think that might have been the name of the town. Did you ever go visit where he was from?
No, I got to go to Hong Kong, but it was always like a brief thing. Like I'd go there and there was like this one area, I forget the name of it. There's like all these stores, a nice vegetarian restaurant. But I'll tell you something that relates to Bruce Lee there. Like on our rooftop in our building, we could see the water and oversee where Hong Kong is. And you know, there's the stories of Bruce Lee used to have like these him and the other like it was Wing Chun and Choi Lei Foot. They used to like fight each other on rooftops. So I could see like there was a nice rooftop on our building, similar culture to Hong Kong there. So I'm on the rooftop. I practice my martial arts on the rooftop, and I'd look over and see Hong Kong, and I think like, wow, Bruce Lee used to like be training on rooftops right over there. You know?
Right there. Yeah, yeah. I had a buddy of mine, right? He's in his I think he's in his early he's now. I used to work with him. He came from Hong Kong. And he used to tell me stories of when he was younger and he used to watch Bruce Lee at what the hell was the name of it? Something Steel. And that's where he would shoot and he'd be shooting a few things. And he said just watching him was something else. But my buddy Chung, who I worked with, he was always into, you would see him in the morning and it looked like Tai Chi, all, you know, like he was moving his energy. And this guy had, you know, he retired a few years back, but if you were to look at him, you would not think this guy was 78 years old, 79 years old, you know, because he took care of himself. And he was always, you'd see him doing weird movements and stuff, but he would always tell me how he was moving his energy and moving the energy and stuff as Americans, we sort of look at and be like, oh, okay, that's a bit, you know, strange to us. But over there, it was a bit different for him, you know, how he was raised and how they were taught. So you moved there, and how long are you there for?
Shenzhen, I was probably there for like, it must have been about, I think like 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 years.
So
And I
seven
met
years.
I met my wife there too. My wife.
Okay, you met your wife over there. You spent 7 years there. You're teaching English still, right? At this point, yep, making some money and still training, right?
Yeah, I found a really good teacher. He was about 2 hours away in the bus, and I would train with him, and then I would train a lot on my own on the roof. And then also during that time, I got into writing articles and doing acting while in Shenzhen as well.
Okay, is there a lot of work for foreign actors over there?
You know, it's really if they like your face and they like your look, you can get work easily. It was a little weird for me because I was already like, okay, I was in my 40s, but I had like kind of long, young looking face. So I kind of felt like I don't know where I really belong in here. Like I can't play a young guy. I can't play an old guy. I was kind of like in this weird place, but I would get these jobs usually like a businessman. It was supposed to be a businessman. And all you got to do is wear a suit, smile, shake hands, and point. Or pretend you're saying, they'll put a dialogue into later. So they'll be like, "Woo, woo, woo." You can say anything, you know?
Yeah,
So that was,
so
that
very
was
simple.
yeah, it was fun. It was cool. Like I made some money. I'd do like maybe like one job a month or something like that.
Okay, so what was it like for you? You know, you said you're still doing the teaching English. You know, you're working over there. You're still training. And what gets you all of a sudden into that? Hey, I'm going to start acting. I'm going to start writing. What gives you that little bump? You know, what gives you that little push?
With the writing thing, I mean, I've been doing that like around as long as I've been doing martial arts since I was a teenager. I used to do music and like that was my thing for a while, but nothing materialized with that. So, but I still had that creative spark in me. So that was something I always wanted to do. And the acting was something I wanted to try, but just couldn't get an opportunity in America. So it was like, okay, I have an opportunity. I'm definitely going to take this because I didn't have any plans like to try to be some like, you know, big shot movie star. But I was like, I want to get this out of my system. You know what I mean? I want to try it. I want
Yeah,
to
give
feel
it a
like,
shot. See where it goes.
yeah, I just feel
Yeah.
like okay, I did it. Now I don't have to chase that dream anymore.
So you're over there, you're having fun. You meet your wife there. You're teaching English. You're doing your martial arts. You're doing your kung fu, and it seems like you're having a great time, right? When do you? So you're writing. Now we're getting into the writing part of it, and you're acting. So when does that start taking off? You're writing. When does that take off initially?
So, okay, so like I started a little bit before I got to China, but it didn't really materialize until I was in China. After my whole music failure career thing, I was like, I'm going to reinvent myself and I want to try to figure out a way to continue writing in a different way. So I wrote like a little martial art article in like a magazine. It was like a really small indie magazine. I got that published. That was like the start. But then once I moved to actually my first article I think was in Beijing, and I submitted it to like a well-known Kung Fu Tai Chi magazine, and they submit. We took really cool pictures, and we got that published. And after that, I had a connection with the publisher there, and he knew I was in China, so he kind of published all my articles after that. So that was
That's awesome. That's
yeah, that
awesome.
was really cool.
And as I can tell, people connections and knowing somebody, whether it's here at home or abroad, it's always a good thing to have. Like you said, you gave him your first article, and then while you were over there, he kept, he kept putting them out for you, which is great. So you're there, you're doing that. You're still writing. So what was what gets you into, all of a sudden writing like, hey, I'm going to write a movie, I'm going to write a book. What gets you into that?
Okay, so that started, the idea was already set like before I moved to China. I was living in Jersey City, which I heard is nice now, but it was really like a hardcore ghetto when I lived there. I had that now, and my favorite movie was The Warriors from like 1979,
Yeah.
So I always like wanted this. I had this idea around that time. I want to make a story with a tragic character. I wanted to be take place in the cities, and I wanted to like have this progressive story. So I had this idea for a long time, and then I started writing, and then something snapped. Like I heard a story, it was a true story, and that said, okay, that's going to be the basis for my story.
Okay. So that's going to be the base of your story. So, while you're in China, are you just writing, still writing on that, or going back to it, or continuously writing, rewriting, redrafting it? Or when do you finally sit down and say, this is the story, this is the plot, this is the, what, and I'm going to make it happen regardless, one way or another.
Okay, so I'm living in Shenzhen. I'm living in this. It's before I met my wife. A little bit before I met my wife. I'm living in Shenzhen. It's kind of like a little cheap apartment in this little alleyway type of dingy little alleyway place. And I was listening to true crime. I like the true crime thing. So I heard a story. I was half asleep and I'm listening to this story and I'm like imagining myself, okay, if I was in this situation, how would I defend myself? And the guy was really clever, So he was like almost like this evil ninja type character. And I was like, this is my story. This is going to be my story. And so I didn't start writing it until I moved to the next city, which is Songshan Shaolin, which is the village of the Shaolin Temple. That's when I wrote the actual script for, the novel. I
Okay.
didn't
So
write
you're
the
there,
script. Yeah.
you're there about 10 years now, right? Then, so 10 years you're there, and then you move there. You move to where the Shaolin temples are and all that. And so what was it like living there? Getting to see all that. It must have been your dream of, being in martial arts, kung fu, like this is the pinnacle. You know what I mean? I'm going to go see the Shaolin temples. I'm going to go see the Shaolin monks, see all that. What was that like?
So at first, I forget what drew us there, but we took a trip there and then we took another trip there, my wife and I. At this point, I'm with my wife. I think the second or third time I met my shifu, my teacher, my current teacher, my main teacher, and he was a really cool guy. So we connected well. And he's like, if you love martial arts, you should be here, not Shenzhen. So then I brought it up to my wife and she's like, very adventurous. So she was like, yeah, let's go for it. So we just took this giant risk, because so Dongfeng City is like where the village Songshan Shaolin is. So the city part is called Dongfeng and then you have Songshan, the village area. So it's like kind of like a poor neighborhood. So the Shaolin Temple has a compound. They're like at this, to me, it felt like the end of the road. There's this giant Shaolin compound, and there's a lot of tourists these days. A lot of tourists go in there. There was some scandal and stuff that happened recently, but anyway, so outside of the compounds are all these little schools that teach Shaolin Kung Fu. So my shifu had a school outside, which is actually more authentic than the inside the compound because there's so much tourism now. But now that's straightening out now. They're making that more traditional again because it got out of
So,
control for a while.
yeah, I was going to say, so it sort of went out of, tradition where basically anybody and everybody could show up and probably, learn a little from the guys in there, but it's
Yes and no. I mean, like, there's tourism there, so you can go, anybody can go and see the place, but the train is a little different. Like, they'll have special, like, within the Shaolin compound, like, there's one giant school called Tago, which is like really famous. And like, they have like a section where they have like for foreigners, you know?
okay.
And but my shifu didn't have any foreign students. Like I made a connection. Well, he did have some, but not like me that lived there. So the training is still authentic, but there was a time where they were really promoting the temple as like a tourist attraction. But now they have a new abbot, they have a new leader because the other guy was corrupt, and they actually recently got rid of him. So now he's trying to change things back to making it more less of like
Traditional.
that giant tourism track. But where we were in the village is not like that at all because there's no tourists in the village. So where my shifu was teaching was just like it's basically kung fu training with really simple living standards, like extremely simple, like no heat in the wintertime and an outhouse simple, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So give my listeners almost, a breakdown of what it's like, You're in the village and they're teaching you, your shifu's teaching you, and he's not just teaching you about, martial arts, he's teaching you about life and life lessons, right? Tell us what was that like, to be able to experience that, to be able to live it.
Okay, so the students who live there are pretty young, and it's almost like a military school. It's kind of like that for those kids. Their lifestyle's really rough. I mean, they eat simple food. They live in a dormitory type place. There's no heat in the winter. They use outhouses. They wash their hands by clothes. So very rough, rugged, rural lifestyle. So that's part of the training. They train outside. So for me now, I'm like 40 years old, and I'm training with like guys who are like 18 and 17 and 16. Um, for me, it's a little different because I could come and go as I want, you know? Like we had this whole everything fell into place. My wife became extremely useful to my teacher and also to the people whose hotel we stayed in. That this little hotel with like no guests like 90% of the time. And like she did this business with them. So like she was really useful to them. So we're like living for free, we're training for free, half of the time we're eating for free. So it was totally my dream come true. But the life is so tough. Like washing clothes will take like 2 hours, you know, like of labor, you know?
Yeah.
So like that it's really rugged lifestyle, but because I was so excited about, doing martial arts and being in that location, and my wife was also having an adventure that we didn't care about the roughness. So the training was great, but it's also that lifestyle that was so interesting. Like there's so many cool places to go and you explore and you find cool things. And it was not just the training was part of it. But to be honest, in New York City, you could find amazing Kung Fu teachers, you know? So like
Yeah.
there's no shortage of that in America, but the lifestyle and the environment also played a big part on that, you know.
So when you're going through that, what does that teach you about, discipline? Discipline for your body, discipline for your mind. What does that teach you about that?
Well, okay, here's a good story I like to give. Do you know that old TV show Kung Fu from the 70s with David Carradine? So
David
he was
Carradine,
always
yeah.
like, it always seemed like he had some magic power. Like he was so like disciplined that he could do things other people couldn't do. So one time, my wife and I, we went back to America and we couldn't get a direct flight. So we had to go to Beijing first, and then we had to take like 2 flights. And then the whole thing took us like 2 days of travel. And it was brutal, you know? And we got off the plane like, I feel okay. And she's like, I feel okay. Like, because the life is so rough, like anything feels easy to that, you know? So that's part of the training, just being so tough. Like those people are so tough. They don't have heat. They don't use heat in the winter. I mean, that explains it all, right? They go the whole winter with no heat. Like inside, it gets like 30 degrees down there, no freaking heat, you know?
And these kids you're training with, right? Like you said, they're staying in dormitories, but where are they from? Are they local kids or are they all from around everywhere?
You know, they're mostly like within the Henan province, I believe. And what brings them to that, to be like brutally honest, like it's really competitive in China. And if you don't come from a rich family and have like, the best like academic training, like you have a hard time competing. So they're coming from really poor like villages. They need something to do with their life. So they send them to Shaolin to like maybe learn discipline. They could become a coach. Some of them get lucky. They could get into movies and stuff. Like one of my teacher's students actually works, like in movies and stuff. That gives them some, or sometimes they can get into the military after that. It's a little harder to get into the military in China. So like that'll give them maybe an opening to be in the military or be a policeman or something like that. So it's like another alternative for them to do.
So it's almost like a stepping stone. They're coming from these poor villages and they're going through this training with hope that, they can land a job, they can land the military. You're back home now in the States?
Yes,
So
7 years.
where are you living now?
My wife and I are in Virginia, and in the future, we're going to be living in West Virginia.
Okay, down in West Virginia. So, you're writing out there. So are you ready for some questions?
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, what was a typical day like for you in the mountains near the Shaolin Temple while you were training and writing?
Okay, so I wasn't even teaching English at the time, so I had free reign to do anything I wanted. So I would get up, I would make a little simple breakfast, which usually consisted of like some coffee and this like army style biscuit thing I would buy from the city. Real simple breakfast. Um, I when I started writing my novel, I would spend a good like 3 hours probably writing, just writing. And we had this hotel like where there was like almost never any guests. It was like a small hotel, and I could pick a room, any room I wanted, or find some cool spot to sit. And it was cold, and uncomfortable, but it was like exciting and fun. And I'd write that whole stuff. And then I'd either go train, or I'd train on my own, or I'd go see my shifu, which was a cool little walk. Like there was this walk I could go through the kind of like through the mountains. It was about a 15-minute walk maybe, and that was cool. And I have a little couple videos of that. And then I go see my shifu, and he was like always super cool and friendly. And he'd teach me like a private lesson, like, or I train with some of the students, and then I do that for a while. Sometimes I would eat there, sometimes I wouldn't. They would have like some noodle soup with like a little bit of this and that in there, and then like in a bun or something. So sometimes I'd stay there to eat, sometimes I wouldn't. Talk with my chef for a little bit, talk to his wife a little bit, talk to the students. I had like one or two good friends who were like teenagers, but they were like my buddies. Sometimes I train with them, spar with them, hit some pads or something, and then come back. And we had this like kitchen, which was like outside kind of like it had a ceiling and roof, but it had no heat. And it was like in the yard. So we'd go in and we had a little hot plate. It was freezing cold in the winter. Go in
Yeah.
there, make this whole dinner thing would take a long time. Then we'd sit like in the living room because most of the time there's no people there. So my wife and I'd sit in this freezing living room and eat the food. And then like we would like maybe on the computer watch a movie or something, go to sleep. And then sometimes once in a while we go to the city. Like there was this like little you could buy these little like tofu sandwiches and stuff and some hot tea, or we go shopping. Once in a while there was a pizza place in that city. Once in a while we go there. And there was a lot of cool explore. When the weather was nice, we can explore. There's really
Yeah.
cool places. You could just travel and find these really cool little temples and all kinds of cool stuff down there.
It sounds like you had a blast over there. You had a lot of fun. So, what was like, the traditional food over there, up in Shaolin where you are? What's the tradition? It's not like we eat here, it's
Well, in Henan, like those people, like they're like again, like in the village area, they're like kind of poorish. So they would grow their own vegetable. Like the people whose hotel we lived in, they had like this business with my teacher. So what happened was eventually my teacher has a good personality. He doesn't speak English, but he's really good with people. So he got this connection where these tourists from UK, this part of this tourist group from UK would travel to Shaolin as part of their tour around China, and he would give them a show and then teach them a class. So there was like this hotel business nearby, and they would like had a connection together. So they would like a couple months a year, there would be these tourist groups, and they would stay in the hotel and study with my teacher. So, and then they would also go to the Shaolin Temple the next day and go up to Damo Dong, the cave where Damo meditated, and see the Shaolin Temple, see another show. So we got right in the middle of all this, and like we got like I said, we could stay in the hotel, but usually there's almost never any guests. So eventually, my wife became a tour guide. She took the test and everything, and she passed it, and she started. During the tourist season, she would lead these groups into the Shaolin Temple, these UK groups. And I would teach them also. I would help teach them when they came. Like, so it was a really cool experience. So the food, like they had a little like, greenhouse. So they would grow their own vegetables. And now my wife and I are vegetarian, but we eat eggs and stuff. So we would have like stuff like vegetables and tofu, or noodles and eggs and tomato. That was a popular one. They'd have manto is like a big bun. And sometimes like the poor people, like instead of having rice, they'll have a big bun. So manto and noodle egg tomato soup. That was a popular one. Or some vegetables with some egg and tofu, either over rice or noodles.
Now, did you become a vegetarian over there or before you left?
Before.
Yeah. Okay, so How did living in China for 13 years change the way you see discipline, pain, and resilience?
In a big, big way. I don't even know if I could put it into like a sentence or two, but it's changed my outlook on life tremendously because for so many reasons. I mean, I grew up in a broken family. My parents were divorced when I was like 5. I lived pretty much with my dad and my brother, and there wasn't very little discipline growing up. I mean, we could do anything we wanted, and that led to a lot of stupid mistakes, and like my wife's family, like they are very, very close, and they'll do anything. I mean, they'll take the shirt off your back. They'll do anything for you. So it's like two different worlds. So that's one aspect. Like they're very selfless. So that's like unusual, I think, in American culture where people like look out for themselves first.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're very selfish.
Yeah. So that's a huge difference.
And
And
how did
also,
her family welcome you in?
say again.
How did your wife's family welcome? How did they welcome you in? Were they good? Were they fine with you?
It's interesting because like her father is extremely open-minded, and in Chinese culture that's unusual.
Yeah.
And he is really open-minded, and they're really friendly. Like they're my ba and ma. That's what I call them in Chinese, ba and ma. So they're my family.
And are they still with us?
Yes, yes.
Do they live with you guys? Are they back in China?
They're in Dongbei, all the way on the north. It's like minus 10 degrees there now.
Crazy. So you've written dozens of articles on Asian culture and martial arts. Which ideas from those writings shaped Mummy, I Don't Want to the most?
That's a great question. Now, the articles themselves did not have any connection to this story because this story is it. What it is it's based on a true person and it's based on a true story. But when I wrote this story, they didn't know who the guy was, so I made this fictional character based on this story things that I heard about the story. Now, what it did do was it did help me to learn how to be a decent writer. So it helped me in that aspect. But when I decided I was going to write, first I wrote the novel and later I wrote the screenplay, and now it's an indie film. It's going to be out in like a month. So when I was going to write the novel, I had to learn how to write a novel. And that was really, really hard. But luckily I had all the free time in the world. So I had a VPN so I could get on the internet and stuff. So I just started like using YouTube and stuff on how to write a novel, and just started from there. And what I did was I took like a whole bunch of aspects of 70s culture and put it into this character. Like I read the novel of famous movies, like for example, Death Wish. There's a novel, I read that. Psycho was one of the ones I read. The Warriors, Hellraiser. I took all these like 70s, 80s books and read them all, and I kind of like used those as an influence for my story.
So you get inspiration from those, and then so tell us a little bit about when you start, when you start writing.
Okay, so I'm in the perfect environment because I'm surrounded by mountains. I don't have a job, basically. I'm training in martial arts. I have all like the things to inspire me. Like it's the perfect like setting for writing a novel. And this was like I didn't want to, even though this is based on a true story and it's a crime story, I didn't want to make it an action story. I wanted to make it like a drama, like a psychological thriller. So I really put a lot of time and effort into trying to bring out emotions and develop characters. And again, I had all the time and inspiration to do this. So it was like the perfect place and time to do this. Like I couldn't do that now. Like I don't feel inspired now to do that.
Yeah. So you do that. So you start with the novel, then the screenplay. So tell people, why did you choose to tell Mummy, I Don't Want to from the perspective of the offender? And what did that cost you emotionally while writing it?
So again, I wanted to, the whole idea of this is I'm not trying to like glorify violence because the person who this is based on is a real person. You might have heard of him. It's the Golden State Killer. I don't know if you heard of that case. Um, but when I wrote this story, they didn't know who the guy was. So I just made this like fictional character of who I thought he was. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to create like a horrible person that you don't hate, kind of like Clockwork Orange. Like in the Clockwork Orange, like the guy Alex, he's a horrible guy, but for some reason you don't hate him. So I wanted to create this like tragic character, but he does things because he's disturbed. Like I wanted to create that type of vibe because I feel like that can get some emotions going. So that was why I told it from his perspective, because I wanted to be, again, like a psychological thriller. I didn't want it to be like he climbs through the window and then he kills somebody and then he rapes somebody and then he does this and that. I wanted to be like what's going on in his mind.
Yeah, almost get a deep dive into what's going through his mind, what's he thinking, what's next. So, how did your degree in psychology influence the way you built the inner world of your main character?
Well, I don't want to blow it up into more than it is. I got a 2-year online college degree in psychology. It's accredited college. But I don't have like a master's degree or anything in that. But I feel like I'm kind of like I'm good at that naturally. It again, I took a lot of different aspects of the culture and time and these different characters. And I wanted to, make it deep. Like I wanted to make it a deep story. And what I did was I made a soundtrack. Like, cause I used to be really into music. I made this like 70s soundtrack for like what I pictured the movie would be.
Yeah.
And those feelings would drum, like I would get the feeling of the scene through the song. And also again, like I had a lot of inspiration. I was walking through this quiet street in the middle of the mountains. There's no people. And I'm looking at the mountains of the Shaolin Temple, and like there was just so much inspiration at that time that I could really like focus like all my energy and thoughts into this. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that like if I was in the current situation I'm in now.
Or even in the States, if you, because there's so much, it seems like you're over there and, in China, you're doing your thing, but you have downtime over there. It's not a million and one things like here in the States where things are pulling you this way, things are pulling you that way, where you can have some downtime to sit there and write and do all that. So how did you balance staying true to reality while protecting victims and maintaining ethical boundaries in the movie?
Yeah, that's interesting because it's weird because like, okay, so this is like, again, like this is the name is not, I changed the name of the character. I didn't know it's actually, you know what? My original name for the character was James. And this was before they caught the guy, before 2018 when they caught the guy. And when they caught the guy, his middle name was actually James. So it's like, okay, now I got to change this to J. So I changed it to
Yeah.
J. So when I'm writing this, I'm more so thinking about the truth, but I'm thinking about it as a fictional story. But sometimes I feel guilty. Yeah, I'm thinking like, this actually happened, like this, like, and now it's a film, like it's an indie feature film. I've seen it. Nobody else has seen it yet, but I've seen it. And there's people getting their heads smashed in, and getting
Yeah.
raped. And like this actually happened. Like, and yeah, it makes me feel guilty. Like I don't know how to justify that. The only thing I could think of is, the whole idea of this type of stuff is to kind of draw you away from reality. And even a horrible story can somehow give you inspiration. Not inspiration to go do some horrible thing, but just like there's some kind of like, I don't even really know how to put it into words, to be honest. But like we all watch horror movies, and obviously we don't feel like killing people, but it does something, like it relieves stress somehow,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, if you look at podcasts, right, the number one podcasts in the world, mostly true crime dramas, true crime shows that people listen to. Podcasts, I listen to a true crime podcast every night I go to sleep. Sometimes I'll wake up and they'll be talking about someone getting stabbed or this, and it's like, all right, let me shut this off. It's time to go to bed. But there's so much interest in that, the true crime. So what was it like seeing your story move from novel form toward a film project? And how involved have you been in shaping the adaptation?
So when I started writing this, like I told myself, this is gonna be a film, it's gonna be a film. Like I would just like try to convince myself. I know this is a really, really, really hard thing to happen, but I would just like force myself to believe it. And to be honest, I'm a really good writer, but that doesn't mean anything. So I had this idea all the way back in Songshan Shaolin, and I didn't know how I was gonna make this work. I just know something's going to happen. So when I came back, I got a little deal for a book. It was a mess. The whole thing was a disaster, except they gave me a great cover. So they gave me a really good cover. So what I did was I figured the name is catchy. Mommy, I Don't Want To. That's a catchy name. And the way I got that name was there's some people who heard the actual guy, he had them tied up. He was doing all this crazy stuff and he was crying, Mommy, I don't want to do this anymore. So I just said, Mommy, I Don't Want To. That sounds cool. So that was the name. So then the cover looked really cool. So I used the name and the cover to try to like drum up some interest. So it took like forever no, I had a couple people interested, but nothing was happening. Like they were trying to make connections and nothing was happening. So it's really weird because I prayed one night really, really hard, like with all my intention, please let something happen. And the next day I met this guy online who became the director and producer. And it's so unusual how this happened. It wasn't like he had a post, say, I'm looking for somebody. He replied to someone's reply underneath someone else's post. So there's like 50 replies. One guy replied to somebody else like, hey, you got a story? I said, yeah, I got a story. And then we started talking. And then like the first 6 months, we're just talking back and forth, and he wanted to make a short, and then we decided, hey, let's make it a feature film. And he wanted me to change the time period. I said, no, I can't do that. And he works in Dubai and lives in UK. So he's like, okay, so if we're gonna make this a 70s movie, it can't be in Dubai, it's too modern. But in UK, they have old buildings. I said, okay, that'll work, you know? So that's how like it took this not easy, right? I mean, this was like 3 years of like no, maybe like 5 years of strenuous, nonstop trying, praying, trying. And eventually I connected with the right person, you know?
That's awesome. And again, it goes back to the connections, making those connections and having the right people in the right places. So when you were writing your book, right? How did you personally decompress after spending hours inside the mind of a dangerous character like the one in Mummy? I don't want to.
It wasn't a problem for me because, like, I think again, it's like if you let's say you think of Stephen King, this guy writes all these crazy things all day, but I don't think he that like he it makes him crazy, in real life, So these dark thoughts have been in my mind like for a long time, like I used to do music and everything is always connected to some dark side, and I think because like if you think about it, every movie has something bad happen in the movie, right? It would be a boring story if it was just like a good, happy story the whole time,
Yeah.
right? So there's always like this conflict. And like some of the best stories like have the most conflict, And I can't again, like I can't justify I'm not glorifying this bad guy. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to drum up some kind of emotion, And I
Yeah.
think these dark, dark stories are good for drumming up the deep emotions. And that's the whole purpose, like. But it never affected me, like, because I'm always like listening to some dark music or watching true crime. So that's always like been a part of me. Plus the martial arts, you're swinging swords and imagining cutting people. But it's not
Exactly.
like, I mean, and even like, you look at like, some religious scriptures, there's violence involved. So it's not like I don't praise violence. I don't even kill bugs, if I don't have to. So like in real life, I'm not violent, but it's just like a part of human nature, that we have to
Yeah.
explore like that.
Yeah. So I got a couple more questions, and then, but before we get to those questions, where can people get the book?
Okay, so Mommy I Don't Want to by Chris Friedman. It's available you could get the hardcover, you can get the Kindle. It's also audiobook. It's available in audiobook. The guy who read that is he was in one of the monsters in Power Rangers, the original Power Rangers. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that's available on Amazon. You can just go to Amazon and it's called Mommy I Don't Want to by Chris Friedman, and you can get it in those different methods,
Perfect.
audio.
So what do you hope a reader feels or realizes when they finish the last page of the book?
Now, this is a story you either going to get or you don't get, And I've gotten some decent reviews like from strangers. Like one person said they liked it so much they read it in one day. And this was a complete stranger, you know?
Yeah.
So, and people, yeah, they either get it or they don't. So, I mean, it's pretty complex story. I don't know. I think it depends on the individual, like what they get out of it. But I also like to write in a way that leaves some freedom to interpretate things a certain way. I think that's a good writer, where it's not so straightforward. So you can maybe one person will read it and get something out of it, and someone else will read it and get something else out of it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So before I get to the last couple questions, I got three or four more for you. The movie is coming out when?
Okay, so right now, because this is an indie project and like we're all, even the director producer is I'm not saying he's new at it. He's done a lot of stuff before, but he had one feature film that he started and then it didn't get finished. This one is finished. The first step is to well, first of all, they're going to give a screening on the 16th. This was filmed in the UK. So in Manchester on the 16th there's going to be a screening within Manchester. He got a theater, fits like 150 people. So that's going to be on the 16th. The director producer's name is Asif Pervez. He has a small company called Color Frame Studio in UK. So the first step is to promote it through like film festivals and get a little name out there. And then from there, it's going to be like a matter of seeing who's interested in picking it up or where we can get it put. There's not like an exact set plan as of yet, except that we want to finish the film, have a screening, put it into film festivals, and then take it from there.
Okay, perfect. So next month, the 16th, if you're in Manchester over there, they're gonna have a screening, and then you're gonna like typical indie films, you're gonna bring them to small little film festivals and see where you go from there. But I will update the listeners and let them know, when it does come or where it does go, because I'm excited. I'm excited. I want to see it myself. So, for listeners fascinated by both martial arts and storytelling, what first step would you recommend that they take to walk a path even a little bit like yours?
I mean, for martial arts, I wouldn't say there's an age limit or anything like that. It doesn't matter how tough you are, how young you are. All that matters is you practice. That's it. I mean, find a teacher if you want to get better, especially the Chinese martial arts. There's the fighting aspect and there's a competitive aspect, but there's also like a lifestyle aspect. Like you said, the guy who's in 80s and is great shape,
Yeah.
that's a big role in kung fu, being healthy and confident and disciplined and using that for your life. Like
Yeah,
all you
not
need to
discipline just with like the food you eat. It's discipline in your body, discipline in your workouts, discipline in everything, every basically facet of your life, having discipline, you know?
Absolutely. Be a martial
So,
artist, I would say you just need to get a teacher and start training. I mean, that's all there is to it. And have the discipline to keep going, even if you're sick or ill or injured. As far as writing goes, I don't know what kind of advice to give other than like, you're good at what you practice. So if you want to be a good writer, start writing and find your niche. Like I like to do fictional stories inspired by true people. Like I have a second screenplay. This one's not a novel, it's just a screenplay, and it's called Rachel, and it's inspired by I mentioned the guy's name before, Lou Reed. Have you ever heard of Lou Reed?
yeah.
So apparently he had this transsexual relationship with this girl named or guy or girl named Rachel. And I wanted to write a drama, and I heard this story and I said, "Oh, this would be a good drama." So I have that completed. So that's my second one. So find your niche. My niche would be like writing fictional stories inspired by true events.
Yeah. Is there a particular teaching from a master, a book, or your own experience that you find yourself repeating most often to your students and readers?
Not one in particular, no.
Okay. Okay. So I got one more thing, one more question, but I know you brought up the Warriors. So I had the pleasure of meeting what the hell was his name? The character, I think it might have been David Patrick Kelly. I think might have played Luther, but he's the one that's outside and he has the bottles in his hand and he says, Warriors, come out and play. And I can tell you right now, I spent 2 hours right on the set of Ray Donovan in Boston with John Voight and Mr. Kelly. John Voight, when I tell you, is one of the nicest guys. I mean, I don't know, people don't like him because it's politics, but I can tell you this. There was 5 homeless guys sitting out front of the station when they started shooting this movie, and they wanted to remove him. So John Voight said to the producer, "Hey, let them stay there, pay them for the day, we're not going to uproot them." And during takes, you would see John Voight in the middle of these 5 homeless guys standing up around them, just talking to them, shooting the shit, just treating them like regular human beings. John Voight's worth, I think, $100 million. He's been in a lot of these iconic movies, but to see this guy in action, it was unbelievable. I've been lucky enough to meet some famous actors. I met Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson was one of the nicest and craziest guys I ever met. But all that I can say is to people that are chasing their dreams, when it comes to writing, when it comes to acting, or even like you said, kung fu, I think a lot of it is discipline. You got to be disciplined. You got to, I love Chris when you were saying like, oh, it's only a 2-year degree I got online. But what I've learned just from talking with you in the 45 minutes, 50 minutes that we've had here is everything you've set your mind to, you've accomplished, right? You said, oh, I tried music, but I failed. But at the end of the day, you still tried it. You went into it, you tried it. Hey, and you know what? You did it. You moved on to the next thing. You moved to China you moved to China, an American moving to China. You're living right near the Shaolin Temple up in the mountain, you've lived a life that only people could imagine. And to me, it's a lot to do with your discipline and your zest and your adventurous spirit of, hey, I want to see what it's like over here. I want to see you started in China, you started teaching American, English. You started in one place, moved to the next, you spent 13 years in China. Did you ever think as a young kid growing up in Long Island that you would say to yourself, oh, I spent 13 years living in China?
It was a goal I had.
It was a goal, but it seems like to me, one of the things is everything you have manifested, right? From the music to writing to being a movie to a screenwriter to training to going to the Shaolin Temple to do Kung Fu. Everything you've put your mind to, you've accomplished, you've achieved. So when you said to me, like, oh, it's only a 2-year degree, don't ever sell yourself short, ever, because you are someone, and I've talked to probably 100 people already, interviewed 100 people. When people say that, like, oh, it's only this, it's only that. It's not. It's 2 years. You got your degree, and everything you do, you crush. You know, everything you do, you put your heart into it and you do it, you accomplish it. And that's awesome. One of the biggest takeaways from today is hearing your story, you know, where you came from, moving to China, doing your thing. But every small little thing that you've talked about, you've accomplished, you've achieved, and you set your mind to it and you accomplished it. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate that, Jimmy. Thank you. You know, and I hope that like, like if I talk about my story, I don't want to try to brag like, oh, I'm so cool. Look what I've done. I'm like hoping like, if anything, even a few people, it can inspire someone to try to reach their whatever their goals are.
yeah, that's the biggest thing I get from hearing your story is, you know, someone's gonna listen to it and say, like, you know, as you talk about this, you talk about that, everything you move on to, you excel at, you know? And that's one of the things, the great thing about having a platform like I do is I tell people all the time when when they come on, "Hey, what do you wanna talk about?" And I say, "Hey, it's your journey," you know? People are sick and tired of hearing my journey and my stupid little stories sometimes, you know? But I have to throw them in there. But with you today, it literally started and it ended with you. Hey, like you said, that was a dream of mine, and you did it. 13 years you spent in China, and I can only imagine those couple years living up near the Shaolin Temple and how cool that must have been. You know, to be probably almost, you know, only I would probably say you're maybe the only foreigner living in the village, right?
That I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not many foreigners there, and you did it, and you achieved it, and that's great. You, as a young kid growing up in Long Island, you manifested it, and look, years later, you're in Shaolin, you're at the temple, you're seeing what it's like. Your wife's giving tours, you're helping people out. So cool, so cool. So, Chris, what's next for you, both on the mat and on the page? Are there new stories or projects you're excited to share? I know you just shared the one about Rachel.
So basically, again, we're right now we're living close to DC, but we will be moving within like 2 years or so. We have a home, a very small home in West Virginia. That's located near this giant temple that because my wife and I are kind of into some spiritual stuff. There's a big temple down there, and that's one of the reasons we moved down there. That's a nice environment, and that'll probably be a good place to write. I mean, we got a really nice view from our patio. We could see mountains and rivers and stuff. And one goal I do have, but again, like I can't say it's gonna happen. I just say I'll try 100% to make it happen. Is to sell like a screenplay or see one of my stories, maybe picked up on a like for example, have a Netflix show or something.
Streaming
But
platform or on the big
yeah,
screen, you know?
yeah. So like I would be, but I don't want to chase this for the rest of my life. I'm getting older, and like I don't want to like have this like nonstop fire that I gotta keep feeding. So I told myself this will be it. If I make this happen, I'm good to go. But now I still have that. I still kind of have that drive. But I'm thinking, like I would like to see a little bit of money from this. Sell a script or something. But if it doesn't happen, I've already achieved quite a bit, so I'll be satisfied.
You've achieved more than the common man, you know? So, Chris, thank you for opening up your story and your heart today. Hearing how years of Shaolin training, a love of martial arts, and a deep interest in psychology all came together in Mummy, I Don't Want to. It is a powerful reminder that our most intense experiences can come from meaningful art. For listeners who connected with this journey, please be sure to check out the book and keep an eye out for the screen adaptation and take a moment to reflect on Chris's message about facing fear, staying disciplined, and never stopping the work of learning and growth in your own life. Chris, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate
Peace
it.
and love. Peace and love. Uncle Jimmy out.